Good morning, good afternoon. Hello, everyone. My name is Dave Lukas, Vice President of Grasp Technologies. I want to welcome you today to what's going to be a lot of fun, I think, and we've got some amazing stuff to share with you. Before we get into it, though, I just want to check. I want to make sure that you can see myself, see Brian, see Louise, see the screen, and hear us. So if you don't mind, just in the chat box, I'm looking at it over here, just chat real quick, yes, that you can see us, hear us, and all that stuff. You can even do it in the questions box as well, too. Excellent, excellent. Getting a lot of yeses in there. Great, great. Thanks, everybody. Welcome to Solving the Data Puzzle with Grasp and Traxo, the 5 missing pieces in your travel program and where to find it. We're going to dig into some really great topics today around this and how to really solve for this challenge. You guys, a lot of you might have seen the press release that came out yesterday with Grasp and Traxo and what we're doing. Really excited about this. This is kind of the coming out party, if you will, for all of this. And so excited to have you all on. This will be recorded, so we will be sending out the recording afterwards. You will also have access to a copy of the presentation that we're going to do today. And if you do have questions, feel free to put them in the questions box as we go, but we'll reserving time at the end for Q&A. So we'll get to them at the end, but if it's top of mind for you, put it in there so that we do get to it at the end. So with that being said, Brian is going to lead the slides today from Traxo. And so Brian, go ahead and kick off things from your side and let's have some fun.
Yeah, let's do this. Thanks, Dave. Appreciate it. So first, let's introduce ourselves, right? So it's important to get to know your panelists and who are these people that are talking to me, right? So we are very happy to be your trio of panelists to chat with you on this topic today. So maybe Dave, why don't you go first? Give us a little just a quick overview on you.
Sure, you guys can see a lot of stuff on the screen. Dave Lukas, I've been with Grasp, gosh, about 17 years, first as an investor and then in the vice president and CSO role. A lot of you I know and have spent time with over the years, so great to be on with you, great to see you, and look forward to getting your feedback on this and what we're doing here.
Excellent. And then I'm Brian Butler. I'm the Chief Sales Officer at Traxo. So you've got the two sales guys at Traxo and Grasp talking to you today. I have been...
no, not the 2 sales guys.
What's that? Oh no, yeah. Oh no.
Oh no, not the 2 sales guys.
But I've been in the corporate travel space for about 20 years now. I came up through Hertz. Spent a lot of time at Radius Travel dealing with global travel data. Upside, and now at Traxo. So have a lot of experience in and around the data issues and the data problems in the travel space, and excited to be with you today. But hey, we're just the 2 sales guys. We have no credibility whatsoever being the 2 sales guys at the technology companies in the travel space. So we've brought in Louise for credibility. Louise, please introduce yourself.
Thanks, guys. I'm Louise Miller, Managing Partner for Areka Consulting. I oversee our indirect practice, which is very exciting because we touch data across many different categories, travel categories, including meetings, expense card, as well as data in procure to pay, source to pay, professional services, and others. So data is top of mind for our customers, and I'm thrilled to be here today to help guide the discussion. Thank you.
Very good. Excellent. Well, thank you very much for joining us, Louise. Obviously come with a breadth of experience and from our perspective, really kind of speak for the buyer. You have a lot of buyer customers, clients that you work with day in and day out, and have throughout your history in the consulting space. So you know this really well, and I feel like have your finger on the pulse of the travel buyer. So appreciate your insights throughout this.
Thank you.
And that actually is it's a good segue because it gets us into, well, first, a very simple question. And that question is, how do you know that your data is good? Right? How do you know your data is good? Second to that, for that matter, what even is good data, right? And if you're sitting there kind of thinking through a bunch of different answers, and probably everybody out there has a different answer, you're not alone, right? And that's because there are a ton of problems with the data in this industry. So Brian, if you want to go to the next slide, let's talk about those problems, right? And so you've got a massive data set, right? T&E is the second largest, most controllable expense in most corporations, right? It's a huge data set. It encompasses so many different areas of company. And because of that, it's disjointed, it's disparate. In a lot of ways, it's incomplete, right? There's no data standards in our industry. In fact, the underpinning of it, as a lot of us all know, is still built on systems from the 1960s, for Pete's sake, right? Every program, different, unique requirements. Every system, how it interacts is different. Data management is a lot of times manual, it's untimely, and it creates this very reactive environment, right? And so, you know, because of this, we have these serious problems that we need to overcome. And at Grasp, we've devoted, you know, our lives to this. And, you know, that's something that we continuously have to work on just when we think we've seen it all, right, Louise? Something new crops itself up. So, you know, just speak to this from your standpoint. Are we hitting the mark with these areas? Is this the state of the state? Is it worse? Is there anything we're missing?
Yeah, great question. I think the first point is that for each of us, good data means that we're credible when we try to make decisions. We try to communicate to our suppliers and internally to our stakeholders. And these are the things that are in our way, right? We know that if we don't have good data that we can explain, it puts us in a defensive, reactive mode. And the disparate systems that we have to work with make our job twice as hard. So these are the problems that we deal with every day.
Yeah, and this is just with the data that you have. What about the data that you need, but you don't have, right, Brian? So talk to us a little bit about that.
That's where Traxo comes in. That's what we live and breathe every single day, and our kind of mission in life is helping to solve the leakage problem. That is the leakage issue, right? So you can only manage what you can see. You can only make decisions on what you can see. Well, what about the rest of it? According to the data that Grasp ran, this is from 2017 through 2019, so 3 years worth of data comparing TMC booking data versus expense data and payment data, found that on average, corporates are spending or end up 40% of their business travel bookings are made off channel. They aren't made with the TMC. They don't have any visibility into it. It's this, you can see the numbers on the right-hand side here, about 5% in air. It tends to be the smallest area of leakage, 34% in car, 64% in rail, and the one that we all know and unfortunately in the travel industry hate, the leakage in hotel, which anywhere from 50 to 60%. The data showed it was about 57%. We all know the hotel attachment rate, about 50%. That's just kind of the standard. You're hitting 50%, you're probably doing a pretty good job. All right, so that's kind of that's the problem, right? So we're putting out the problem. Well, how do we try to solve this? How do we try to get our hands around this? Well, let's go to that subtitle of this session, the 5 missing pieces in your travel program and where to find them. So let's get granular. Let's start talking about each of these 5 pieces. So this first one that we've got is number 1 is missing data, right? So we covered this a little bit just now, but if you're relying on just one set of data, many times your TMC data, then you're missing out. You're missing out on a whole slew of additional insight, depth, as well as just additional bookings that are outside of that. You really need to include things like expense data, payment data, HR systems data, and then we just talked about off-channel booking data. You have to have a full picture of it. So that off-channel booking data, supplier direct booking data, online travel agency bookings, and rideshare data, right? So the things that don't even have necessarily a booking, that's gonna be, it's not gonna be done, most likely done before the trip even takes place, it's gonna happen while on the trip. So you need to make sure you're getting your arms around this missing data. Louise, I would love to have your thoughts on this. I assume when you engage with a new client and you start diving into what data they have, I assume you wanna get your arms around all of this, but what do you normally see?
Yeah, what we normally see is quite interesting. Very few companies are leveraging and comparing book data to expensed data. Very few. More common is feeding payment data into expense because it obviously enables a much more streamlined and efficient expense reporting process for users. HR system data ideally is where it all starts, creating that user profile, no matter what system that you're joining. And so having consistent user data is helpful in linking. It's a first step in linking all these different data sets together. Now, why do we care about linking these data sets together? Number one, it's one way to help us find leakage. You know, obviously you can use an itinerary capture tool like Traxo, where we can, you know, find all of those bookings that were not made through the approved channels. But not everyone has that installed, so we have to have other ways. And reconciling all of this data is one way to do that. We usually find, you know, no more than 80% compliance to form of payment, you know, preferred suppliers. Expense data tends to be more all-encompassing, but it's missing a lot of that granular level detail you need. And last but not least, what I've seen with my customers and in the market during the pandemic is that the interest in off-channel booking data is rising exponentially, not just because we're trying to push duty of care data to a provider or because we're trying to get line of sight into the spend. We've been doing that for years, but it's because they want to understand the user experience. Why are travelers going direct to websites or to OTAs? And a lot of that is happening because of the pandemic and because of the level of information you need to research to actually go on a trip. So I think that the use case for why off-channel booking data is so much more interesting than it was in the past is evolving.
Why, but you know, so you mentioned the pandemic, why not, why doesn't every client just say, we're fully mandating, you have to use our TMC, you have to go through our channels. If you do not, I don't know, you're fired, right? So why don't you see those stronger mandates, especially coming out being in a pandemic?
Two reasons. Number one, the fight for talent. You know, when talent that's in demand is looking at different companies and where they want to work, they look at the travel policy. They look at how much flexibility, freedom, you know, how does the travel policy and program work? How is it going to impact their work life? And, you know, there's so many reasons, for example, why travelers would book rail direct or hotel direct, for example, and car. Air is less common because usually the corporate deals for air are pretty good, and the TMC is actually issuing the ticket. They're at the point of sale. For some of these other services, it's just the booking. And so it's easy enough for that traveler to get tempted to, you know, dig into a rail booking directly with the rail provider because there's more content there. So I think that's one reason, is the fight for talent. The second reason is who owns the budget. So if you have a budget owner who is responsible for that bottom line and they're confused by what they see in managed channels versus consumer channels, that's a real issue that managed travel has to address and understand in the marketplace. So good luck telling a budget owner that they have to book in a managed channel if they feel like they have good reason to still comply with duty of care and or still get a good deal on whatever it is they're trying to buy for travel.
Well, we also make the the assumption that all travel happens in this nice orderly fashion, like it works the same way it's supposed to every time, and that's just not the case of business. We all know that. We're dealing with business, people, last minute things, all that stuff compounds, and I got to get this done, I'm just going to go book it. That type of stuff happens all the time, so that's never going to go away. And I think it's really important that it can look daunting, to see this list of all this stuff, but I mean, how do you eat an elephant? You do it one bite of it at a time. And so that's something that you just, you don't have to boil the ocean with all these different data sets. You incrementally build this data ecosystem for yourself over time, and it gets better and better and better. And, I guess one last point I'd make on this slide, at least for the TMCs that are on today and listening, this is an area of really great opportunity for you. Obviously, you've got a very rich data set. We know that we've worked with you guys for 25 years, right? And you've got an incredibly rich data set in your back office and all of that. But these other data sets allow you to see what's happening even outside of you, allow you to work more closely with your client some of that stuff maybe make a lot of sense. Hey, it should be booked outside of us. Other stuff may not. And you can look at policy, you can look at contracts. It just allows you a better way when you see all of the data to be able to provide a better service to a corporate client. And obviously a corporate client gets, a better overall program by, continuing to improve this with their partners. So everybody wins in doing this. And I think that's a really important part of why Traxo and Grasp, we've done what we've done, because we see that. So, with that being said, I think, let's go to the next one, Brian, because we're just beginning the fun, right?
Absolutely. That's only one.
Yeah. So number 2 is inaccurate data. So go ahead and fill out the slide for everybody to see, right? Kind of talked about it before. Travel data is dirty, right? It's just dirty. It's got all kinds of things happening to it. Not to mention it's a massive data set, but we're human beings. We're inputting data all across sets. We aren't perfect. Systems aren't perfect. Systems mess up. Booking tools mess up. All these things, happen throughout the process. And so you may have multiple different suppliers. They have different operational systems. They have different ways of looking at things, calling things different names for input, all of that. And then expense too is, another thing. Still a lot of human input. I mentioned things on there like reason codes, other manual fields. You TMCs know there's 1,000 free-form fields in your back office, right? That you can put anything you want into for any client the way that you want to, right? Well, that doesn't line up with expense or any other stuff. So, it creates a lot of inaccuracies that are also with the missing data that, again, kind of compounds, right? And that's a challenge. So, Louise, please sound off on the inaccuracies that you guys deal with in data.
You brought up reason codes a moment ago, and that is a very hot topic right now because, most of my customers have reason code choices in their online booking tool. In each country, they have staff. They may or may not have the same online booking tool and the same reason code choices. Then you shift to the actual TMC who's providing service when someone calls or chats or emails. Same thing. That agent has a list of reason codes for compliance, non-compliance, all the different things that you try to collect about the trip. Finally, you have expense reason codes, and guess what? Absolutely none of these match in many, many client programs. So if I'm trying to sort out why are my travelers booking rail direct instead of through my online booking tool, or if I'm trying to sort out why are travelers booking a particular hotel through a consumer site instead of my negotiated rate in my TMC's rates through the online booking tool or through the agent. It may be that staying with friends and family, it may be that they attended a meeting, but if the reason codes are different in each data source, you kind of have a big problem on your hands. And that's just one example of how the data can be inaccurate because a human is checking a box and we don't always give them the same choices.
Yeah, and actually, Brian, if we go to the next one, there's another issue with this, and that's the untimeliness of data. So not only can this be in the states that Louise just talked about, but when you get it is another big problem, right? Like we were just talking about expense. That can come up a month or so after the fact, right? Because you can see on the screen, once the traveler submitted their expense report, had it approved, it can be months after. Payment data, right? Credit card statements, all that stuff can be a month behind, right? So by the time you do have that data, a lot of the opportunity may be lost. And, that's always been a big challenge, right? Duty of care is so important now. And talk about off channel, Brian, right? I mean,
Right.
Somebody goes off channel, this stuff comes through a month later. How are you supposed to keep up with your duty of care, right? So, talk about that a little bit.
Yeah, well, I mean, that's, it's the pre-trip nature of the travel data is necessary. You have to have it. You cannot rely just on post-trip expense level data when it comes to anything that's booked outside of the TMC. You have to have visibility into what's happening at the time of booking. If you have it at the time of booking, you can take action. You can decide what you want to do. Do you want to make sure that this gets duty of care coverage? Do you want to ensure? Do you want to potentially do this as a rebooking? You're seeing they've spent way more than they're supposed to. They're out of policy where they could have booked and saved with our preferred suppliers. You can take action if it's been booked, if you have the data pre-trip. Once you have it post-trip, that ship has sailed. it's done. You cannot do anything about it. If the person had issues when, from a duty of care perspective while they were traveling, you weren't able to help them because you didn't know they were there. You didn't have any visibility over that. So that idea of having these blind spots in your travel program is just it's not really acceptable anymore in today's environment. So you have to find that, and you have to have it pre-trip.
So Louise, thoughts on managing pre-trip and everything, because that's a state of data essentially that's in flux as well, right? It's not always complete, right? And like Brian said, it can be changed and everything. So how should people go about this? Obviously, they understand it. They know, hey, there's a need for this, but how do they best manage it? What are some best practices they should have around this data? Because they need it more timely.
Yeah. I think the first thing we try to do is line up what the client is trying to accomplish with the most appropriate timing and which data source. Because fully reconciled data sources, as you pointed out, are not available till kind of the end, right? When you have expense, when you finish the trip life cycle with expense. So as far as pre-trip data, the very first thing that most of our clients do is try to understand what's happening before the trip, but very few are influencing it unless it meets certain criteria related to COVID, or it's like a gross overspend versus what their policy is.
The way that you travel, right, Louise? So yeah, like first class,
high roller,
right.
penthouses, limos, things like that.
Yeah, I definitely get the call from Pascal, our CEO, yeah. So most companies really want to watch and understand and only catch things that are major. They don't want to, try to influence something that's $20 or $50, right? But over the course of time, looking at what's identified pre-trip, what's identified in the TMC invoiced data, then what's available through card and through expense, you can start to paint a picture of the entire life cycle of the trip. Are the travelers buying certain ancillary services as they become available through a TMC, or not?
Right, and then the other piece of here in terms of the timeless and the pre-trip piece is that I don't know if everyone's seen it. It was just released actually in the last couple of weeks. ISO 31030 is the new standard from ISO that is on travel risk management and having complete visibility over all of your company's travel, so you can support your travelers when they are traveling, before they travel, while they're especially if they're traveling internationally, so you can provide whatever support they may need is a critical element of that standard. So you want to follow that standard, you want to be a part of that, you want to be putting your best foot forward in terms of your travel program, you have to have that complete visibility, but at the pre-trip level, not necessarily months later, right? So that's the time, comes down to the timeliness of the data that you have. All right, let's move on to the next one. So number 4, inconsistent data, right? So this is a problem. So again, we've said this a couple of times, right? It's dirty. Now we're using the word messy, right? Travel data can be messy, and anyone who has tried to put all these things together knows how hard this can be because of how messy it is. So let's think about hotel data. So anyone that has touched hotel data, has tried to consolidate and reconcile hotel data, knows that hotel naming conventions are all over the place, right? So if you've got payment, expense, and TMC, right? So it's all the same trip. It's all the same hotel stay. They could look like 3 different hotel stays because they're all 3 different names of that hotel, right? So they put the city name first and then the hotel, the brand, or they put the brand first and then the city. They put the brand and then the city, and they put the which sub brand it is. Every single system names them differently because there is no standardization around hotel data. So you try to put all this together, you're going to end up with what should have been 1 hotel looking like 3 different hotels. So good luck with that. Rail data, another example. There's a bevy of them, right? You can go on and on. Anyone who's touched travel data knows all this, but rail data is another one. Inconsistent station identifiers. So it looks like they're going from A to B, but actually they're going from A to B to C, or this other traveler is going here, and they're actually, you can't make any sense of it, and you all of a sudden just go, I can't do this. I try to get into this level of data. I try to make some decisions. I try to take action with what is this data telling me. I can't make sense out of it because of how inconsistent it is. The last one is, or the last example here is also the reservation versus actual spend, right? So we have booking data. So that's great. You know what it was supposed to cost. With airline, because it's that point of, so you're buying it ahead of time, for the most part, it's going to match, right? But hotel, rental car, pretty much everything else that we do, we're going to make reservation. You have a kind of a promise of what this is going to cost, but then you change things while on trip. So you're going to have then a difference between what you've booked and what the expected expense is going to be there versus what the actual spend was. Louise's data shows that it's about less than 80% when you try to match these up. So again, good luck trying to make sense of all this data when it's so incredibly inconsistent.
And it's the little things that make the biggest difference in a program, right? I mean, and that's why I kind of said earlier, like, just getting things together, that's the beginning. Then you kind of go to work on it over time and it evolves and gets better and better. But I mean, like true destination sitting. What if somebody's got a long layover somewhere? How is that, determined, right? There's that type of stuff that has to be done. And even things down to, I mean, we've had people that, that we've worked with that had their previous reporting they were doing with incorrect currency rates and everything, throwing off their data by hundreds of thousands, even millions of dollars that they were converting on, right? So they're making decisions off of data from one little thing, just a currency rate that is affecting, a year's worth of data in a huge way. So, the inconsistencies are all over the place, but it's these little details that can make such a big difference. Louise, you probably see that all the time.
We do. Part of the issue is that there are so many suppliers when it comes to hotel and even rail. And so I think the challenge that my customers have in particular is how to take data that's imperfect and inconsistent, as you mentioned, put it together and make business decisions. Share the data with stakeholders in a way that makes sense. Today, if you're not careful, you end up sharing data that doesn't add up. And then you can lose credibility for a long period of time if you don't really understand how to explain. The second point is, when you're explaining the crazy data in our space to someone who isn't familiar with it, it sounds like it's really kind of a challenge. So, getting your story straight is critical. And I think that there's a balance between living in fear that your data isn't perfect and never sharing it, and rationalizing each data set inconsistencies and bringing together what makes sense for the decision that you're trying to make or the communication of the policy or procedures that you're trying to have internally.
Well, I think to that point too, it's really important. The data is never going to be perfect. So if you're trying to achieve true 100% perfection across all these data sets from all over the world and everything, there are some elements that just aren't going to be there, right? So if you're trying for 100% on everything, that's more of probably a pipe dream. But if you're at 30% accuracy with your data and you can go to 80% or 85% accuracy, I mean, Louise, that's a night and day difference. That's a whole new world, and that's what you got to focus on.
All right, well, that's a good segue into then.
We got another one, don't we?
We got the fifth one, right? So, right, here's the big deal. So, it's the last one because it's probably the hardest. Great, you've gotten your hands on all this data. You've gotten your hands on every little piece of it. Now it's time to put it together and make sense out of it and actually have that actionable outcomes that what the data tells you coming out of it. So that's wonderful. Now you got to consolidate it. But maybe you've got 10, and that's probably light, 10 sources of data. And that means you're going to have 10 different formats. The chances of those formats of those data sets matching and having field names the same and having different pieces of data that are all matched is, it's probably 1 in a million that you're actually going to have that. Maybe some of the fields are going to match up. There's standards in the space of what you're going to have in there. But a lot of it, especially the depth of data, is going to be different for every single different supplier. I mean, if you look at air data versus hotel data versus rail data versus car rental data, they all have different fields and format sets and things like that. So putting this all together is incredibly hard. Dave?
Yeah, consistency. Like this is where the rubber meets the road, right? So you have all these data sets. You got to consolidate them, you got to cleanse them, you got to normalize them, you got to line things up across the data sets. And that's something that I think a lot of you guys know that's kind of our bailiwick at Grasp, if you will. But it's, I mean, there's just there's so many variables. So every time it's done, it's a different work. Every time you add a new data set, you can't have to look across all the other data sets and do that again. And it's funny, you have to choose your consistencies here. Remember, I just said a minute ago, 100% accuracy across every single piece of data is probably not going to happen across 10 data sets. In fact, I almost guarantee you it's not. But if you choose your consistencies of how you want to handle it and how you're going to handle the data sets that you're going to work with and do it consistently across them, that's the key to it. In fact, Eric Mueller, founder of Grasp, who incidentally, Louise was his boss when he first got started in this industry. I think you rubbed off on him and taught him some things, because one of his favorite things that he said that's always stuck with me over the years is, whatever you do, be consistently wrong. And I always laugh, but it's true. It's choosing those consistencies, because that, not everything's going to be there, not everything's always going to be right. But if we handle it consistently over time, we're going to get from that 30% to 80% or 90%, right with the data. And that's again, a night and day difference. So, Louise, go ahead.
What's your take on this, Louise, in terms of like what you have to do with your clients when you finally you step in and you finally get your hands on all this data, trying to put it together, trying to consolidate it? What's that like for you?
So I'd say the first thing is that most clients don't attempt this all at once, obviously. So usually we go down parallel paths. The first is to try to get all of your TMC data. Not everyone uses one TMC globally, right? And so that's why I know, Dave understands, because that's what your company spends a lot of your energy doing. So the first thing is to consolidate all the TMC data. And a lot of companies have gotten pretty far along with that because we have good, credible providers, and we've been attempting this for a long period of time. The challenge comes in when the operational standards aren't the same, either because it's a non-owned partner that hasn't been brought on to the TMC's global standard, or you're simply using more than one TMC. So that's the first, and a lot of companies have attempted that and are pretty far along with it. The second thing that we usually try to attempt is normally based on the duty of care policy and procedure of the company. So they're interested in pulling in data sources that are different than the TMC, so that they can have better duty of care data. Data from Airbnb for work, for example. Another example is payment. And so a lot of companies have already fed their payment data into expense, as we talked about earlier. So those are the work streams that have been happening for a long time. A lot of programs are pretty mature. Now where we are today with sustainability, with the pandemic, there is a much bigger focus on rail. Very, very few companies have gotten to the point where they're bringing rail data, off-channel rail data, into their ecosystem. So I think that's kind of what's next. And last but not least, most of our customers decide what they're going to use the data for before they attempt to just bring together all these different sources of data. So the most common in order, number one, duty of care. Number two, line of sight into spend, even if it's not to interfere before the trip, okay? And for procurement leverage, right? Then three, to try to understand before the trip's happening, get more visibility into off-channel and in-channel spend, so that you can control what's happening and protect travelers proactively. So those are the reasons that we are usually on this mission, and the kinds of ways that it usually originates.
Where are you seeing it? You can't join a webinar or be a part of an industry event lately without hearing about sustainability. Where are you seeing that falling into the priorities these days? Because if you have a sustainability effort, you can't manage it, you can't do carbon offsets, you can't do all the things around it if you don't have all the data, right? So what are you seeing around that from your clients?
Yeah, that's a great question. I would say the most interest lies in being able to give travelers choices at the point of booking. And in a way, being able to help travelers understand the difference between going by rail and going by flight, as one quick example, it's going to draw them into the program, right? So it's a way to reduce off-channel spend in theory. But very little of that actually happens around the world today. The tools aren't set up right. There aren't good enough standards to do those kinds of comparisons. So we're a little ways away. But back to your point, most of our customers are using their TMC data to get a hold of their carbon footprint and make plans to try to accomplish their sustainability goals. So we're still in our infancy, and for sure, trying to get access to more and better data is a key. That's what we've been talking about for years. But getting those options to travelers visibly at the point of sale is where we're heading.
Yeah, that's part of the next frontier around sustainability, is augmenting the data from all these sources with another data source, a true sustainability carbon emissions data source that tracks all this stuff and has the detail around it that you can then bring alongside the data to give you that level of visibility. So that's kind of the place where everything's going now and happening and all that as well. So it's another data source, another data feed to bring in alongside all of it.
Exciting. All right. So we've gone through the five, right? So these are all big issues, right? And they've been with us for a very long time. Certainly the last 10 years, or certainly before then as well, but it has had a spotlight on it for the last 10 years plus of, well, why hasn't this been solved before? Why hasn't one of the big players come in and said, I'm going to solve this problem. I'm going to figure out how to pull all this data together. I'm going to consolidate it. I'm going to normalize it. I'm going to then present it. I'm going to make it visually available to everyone. Why hasn't this been solved before? Well, I'm going to speak to at least the off-channel piece of it. So the off-channel piece, I think a lot of it has been, especially prior to the pandemic, of if you are going to put in some kind of off-channel data collection method, then you are in effect condoning it, right? So it's the corporate travel manager saying, okay, if you end up booking outside of the TMC, just make sure you do this or follow this process or whatever it may be to collect it. Well, then that in essence might feel like they're saying, and it's okay if you do it. It's okay, don't worry about it, right? And that's not a message they want to be sending. Want to be sending, you need to come through the program, you need to stay on channel, we need to have it going through. So that's been a major problem. But now as we are coming, hopefully, out of the pandemic, we're in a place now where really having any of these blind spots in your data is just not acceptable anymore. You need to make sure you're providing that duty of care. The new efforts around sustainability, you have to have that visibility into it. So all of a sudden it's not available. It's not really okay to have that anymore. So that's a big piece of why it hasn't been solved, because everything that you would do, you would say, well, maybe I'll have 70% of the data, 75% of the data. Well, I'm making decisions based on 75% of the data. You want to have as close to 100% of the data as possible to make those decisions. I think the other piece of it, and Dave, I'm happy to have you chime in on this, is that you said it before, the boil the ocean, right? It's a huge problem. So for any one player to come in, deal with all these different suppliers, all the different segments, try to make sense out of it, try to make it all happen, has been really hard.
Yeah, the big challenge has been that that front end open booking type data, right? We talked about 40% before being done off channel, right? So like Grasp, we spent years beating our heads against the wall, getting good at consolidating, normalizing, cleansing, doing all of that type of stuff that has to be done with the main data sets, TMC, credit card, expense. But there's those issues, right? There's the timeliness issue and that type of stuff. And so there's been a lot of ways that, we've looked at trying to attack this over the years on the front end for that open bookings at that 40%. But they're all been all over the place. There hasn't been a great solution that is consistent or that provides the level of detail you need to do it right. And that's been one of the biggest challenges, getting that detail so you can actually effectively, manage it and do what you need to do. And so, that's always been, the big challenge, right? And we've solved it individually with clients, by doing specific things for them and to their world, because again, every program is different, right? Everybody wants to see the data differently. Everybody wants to, or everybody has different policies. So, we've adapted and done things on an individual basis, but as a consistent solution that can work for the majority of clients across the board, that's been the hardest part is finding that. And so, obviously now we're here today, we'll talk about that in a minute, but that's been some of the biggest challenges from our side, because each vendor's kind of been focused on their own individual areas and what they're good at. But in order to solve the problem, we really have to start working together. So, Louise,
Is that your view? Is that your view as well, Louise?
Yes. For my customers, it's a little bit of the cart and the horse, or the chicken and the egg, because for years we wanted to fight for compliance to our managed channels. As you guys know, I worked for one of the big TMCs for more than 20 years. And, I still believe that putting travelers in the hands of the managed travel universe is the best place for them. However, I don't think that just being able to consolidate the data more appropriately and accurately is ever going to be enough to justify making everyone use a managed channel. That's why I was happy for my customers in the market to see you two come together, because we've tried this now for more than 20 years. And there are too many reasons and too many markets and too many suppliers that to ever get it to 100. So we have to stop thinking we're condoning open booking by having a solution, because that's not true. And number two, we have to embrace the fact that whether the leakage is 40% or 20%, it's still not nothing. So we need to manage it, and that is, really, really important to my customers. Conversely, suppliers have an incentive, and they see the trends of bringing travelers to their direct sites for booking, right? That's never going to.
I was going to say that's where that's the tide. That's where suppliers are going. That's what they're doing. And,
Right.
You guys all know this too, whether you condone it or not, it's happening.
Right.
And it's going to continue to happen. This problem isn't new. It's been around since travel's been around, really, and so let's, instead of kind of going like this about it, let's really solve it, and I think that's where we're at.
Exactly.
And that's what we announced yesterday, and hopefully you saw in BTN this morning and other places, is that Grasp and Traxo have come together because we see this opportunity. We know that what Grasp can do on the data consolidation and visualization side of things, and then what Traxo can do to capture all of the off-channel bookings, we put those two things together. We are getting as close as we can possibly get, or anyone has ever gotten in the travel industry, to actually having a getting to that solved problem. Dave?
No, that you hit the nail on the head. I think, anytime I say this, and I say it in a way that is, it's somewhat tongue in cheek, but it's true. There's a lot of partnerships that happen in this industry. Press releases happen, that stuff happens, but nothing ever happens after that. There's no real results, in a lot of cases. It fades, right? And you don't really hear about it again. And so you don't see Grasp do a ton of partnerships. You don't see us putting out a press release every month with partnerships and stuff. And that's because when we do it, we're really focused on, can we do a 1 + 1 = 4? Can we really achieve something great here for our clients and really help them in a meaningful way, and not just do a press event, but really create something great here? And that's kind of the same philosophy that Traxo had when we met. We really came together on that and said, okay, we're going to commit to this together in a big way. And we're going to really do this right and tackle this problem once and for all, and solve these 5 pieces of the puzzle. So, Brian, I'll turn it to you to kind of go through that, because we can talk about how we solve those now.
Absolutely. These are the 5 problems that we address, right? So missing data, inaccurate data, untimely data, inconsistent data, and then the unconsolidated data. What we believe when we bring Traxo and Grasp together is that we have solutions for all 5 of these. We end up with truly complete data. It includes your off-channel data. So you're able to have all those sources we talked about in the first one that has potential for missing data. We can bring all of those together in one place. You'll have accurate data, because it's all going to be cleansed and normalized via Grasp systems, right? So they're all their back-end work to pull this data together and cleanse it and normalize it and be able to have it consistent, have it all those pieces together is they're going to be able to do it. Timely data. So because of Traxo put together with Grasp, you're going to have it all pre-trip. You obviously will have all the post-trip data as well that you can take action on. You can do things in terms of larger sea change type of program changes, but you will also have it pre-trip, so you can make decisions and actions on a trip-by-trip basis and actually decide what you want to do around that. And then the consistent data, like I said, with the it's very similar to accurate data. It's going to be cleansed. It's going to come out. What you're going to see on the output in the visualization is going to be something that you can actually use and make sense of, that you are going to be confident to be able to provide up the chain, to provide reports, to be able to provide that visualization, and you can put your backing on it. You're not worried about it not adding up. And then last thing, the consolidated data. Grasp uses their own, this is what they've been doing for, is it 20 plus years now, Dave? How long has it been?
Over 25 years.
25 years.
And we got good. We got good because we beat our heads against the wall for 25
I wasn't even
years figuring this stuff out, kept at it.
So you're gonna, what you end up getting is all in one data set. That's the holy grail, right? That's the thing that we've all been wanting, and is to have all this data together in one data set, one visualization of that piece.
Yeah, I mean, truly data that's all brought together, lined up across, so it's all stitched together, so you have a true cost of trip. It's accurately cleansed and normalized. Hotel data, rail data, all that stuff is normalized, collapsed down to the specific property chain, all of that stuff, so it's right. As timely as it can be, and that was, like I said, one of the big challenges is, especially for that off channel and that duty of care side, is getting it timely enough to be able to, one, know what's going on with the traveler, and two, be able to help them and help manage that, right? And that's where Traxo is just amazing at that, which I loved when I saw it. And then the data is consistent, right? It's consistently managed across all the data sets, exactly the way that a client wants it, and it needs to be. And then obviously it's all together. So it is the closest, as Brian said, that we've ever been able to come to really solving the big data challenge that exists in this industry. And Louise, I would love to hear your feedback on how we've done this and what we've done. And while she does that, Brian, you can show a few screenshots of the new system that's going to be released and some of the detail and reporting around this. So go ahead, Louise.
Yeah, thanks, Dave. I mean, for the marketplace, I really believe that having two providers come together to put, really robust TMC-centric data together with those off-channel bookings is groundbreaking. So I'm thrilled for the marketplace, and I'm thrilled for your customers and mine. Choices are great. Innovative choices are even better. And, the pandemic has allowed us to stop and think about how we want to do things as we come out of the pandemic. And, really understanding what's happening with off-channel bookings is key. And understanding how easy it is, to actually implement. A lot of my customers are saying, well, I don't know if IT will let me do this, but magically when all of the IT teams talk, it magically is much easier than everyone thought for a change. So I think the magic is that it's easy. So thank you for that.
Thank you. That's it's been a lot of work and everything. We're excited to be here. And Brian, I think we're ready to kind of open it up to questions, right? I've got some of the questions out that I can see. I'll kind of go through, and please, Louise, on some of these, I'd love to get your feedback. In fact, we have a great one to start. Donna asked, how do you handle capturing group bookings, right? We have more group bookings due to productions, and no lots is missing with inaccurate data. So from the Grasp side, obviously, your main data sets, your TMC and everything, we're going to get all that data. We're going to get it typically daily, right? And have all that from a group standpoint. If you're doing a pre-trip feed, through a TMC, you're going to get that as well. But if you have people booking off channel, that's where Traxo is going to come in and get that. And so, again, it's the same thing. You got to apply all the same cleansing, normalization, and all that to it to make it good. But you can get close to real time on that with those data sets. Brian, you guys obviously have to deal with groups and everything with Traxo. Explain kind of how you guys work.
Right. So, I mean, that's a big part of groups, is that then they end up, everyone, yeah, they could book all together, right? Or they're going to potentially book separately, or at least pieces of it, right? So we're going to help capture that. And how we do it at Traxo is all through confirmation emails, right? So we don't have to worry about having direct relationships with all the different suppliers to be able to get this data. We're going to get it because if travel is booked, and this is a pretty standard rule, if travel is booked, regardless of how you booked it, you're going to get some kind of confirmation email. we are going to capture that confirmation email. We're going to then parse it. We're going to pull all the data out of it. We're going to normalize it and cleanse it, and then we're going to pass it to Grasp so it can be combined with all of your other data.
Louise, any best practices around that from your side, managing groups?
Yeah, I would say one of the issues is we would normally turn Traxo on as a rule with the client's email server. And so what we try to do when there are groups that are traveling that have non-employees that don't have an employee email, a best practice would be to, they have to send all their itineraries to the meeting planner. So we just make sure there's a special email box that's in the company domain, or we just get them as they come into the meeting planner if that person has a company email. So I would just say, attendees that don't have a company email are the trick. You have to figure out what will work for you, and also do it in a way where, legal and compliance and, whoever's paying for the meeting is comfortable, because there are some touchy subjects with taking people's emails and moving them around. So that's usually what the thought process is for my clients.
Great. We have a pair of questions from Ruth. Actually, I'll tackle first. The first one is, how does Traxo and Grasp connect with the TMC ETC? So at Grasp, we actually created the first and only true sync software for the industry. It's still the only one of its kind, right? It's actually a software that talks to the database at the travel agency and automatically updates the data, and it's filtered by client, or if the TMC is using our software, obviously they can see their clients and then filter out the corporate's data to them and that sort of thing through that. But it's all automated, and so everything with us is all automated. And so as soon as we get that data, all those cleansing routines, the normalization, fixing routing sequences, all those different things that we've built over the years to make the data better, goes to work on it, and it happens automatically. And so that's how we get the data from the TMC. Traxo obviously is living at the front end, right, and looking at the open booking side, right? So they're not going to do so much with the TMC there, but that's an opportunity for TMCs to work with Traxo to be able to see that data with their client, to be able to help better run a corporate clients program and help advise them, right, like we talked about earlier. The second one was, how do you make the data relevant and easy to digest, so that necessary people will look at it and everything? So that's a great question, because you can get very complex with your visualizations of data in this industry, right? We've built, executive summary templates with 160 plus tabs in them and 500,000 fields, or calculations and stuff for people, right? And so it's the 80-20 rule, right? You start with the 20% that you need to really focus on. That's the biggest part of your program that you want to manage, and you get the simple things that you need around that, and then you build out from there. Everything can be as big or small as somebody wants it to be, at least in our world from a visualization standpoint. We have a very simple executive summary report, or you can have a very complex one with 50 tabs, right? And so it's just working with your partner, like a Grasp or somebody, to help do that, down to the stakeholders and the different people that, so that they just see what you want them to see or need to see, and you can kind of cut out some of that noise. So that's a good question. Anything you guys want to add to that, just on visualization of things, Louise, and around simplifying, if you will?
Yeah, the first thing, I try to be very careful, because the level of data that you have with TMC data, which tends to be the most rich source, and the level of data you get when you parse an itinerary is different, right? So I try to be very clear about how I separate what reasons I would have for looking at both data sets together, and having clients at Areka that either don't have enough control of their spend or are purposefully open booking, allowing open booking. We've definitely come up with some really good use cases. One or two quick examples. When we're showing spend or any trends at all, we always show off channel and in the managed channel. We always show it together. So right away they can see what we've added in and what we've not. And we would probably put card data on that same slide so that they can see. The second point is when we're negotiating with suppliers. This is where the real fun comes in, because it's super exciting to show, you know, a hotelier or an airline what the view is through the data we captured from Traxo versus the data from the TMC versus the credit card data. Very, very exciting, especially as we're all struggling with low spend volumes and trying to guess who to negotiate with and what to negotiate for the coming 2 years. Being armed with this type of information, honestly, it helps you prove your value to the suppliers, because not one source is going to have the whole picture. And when everything's very well established and relationships are super mature, okay, maybe it's not shocking or, you know, groundbreaking. But when you're having to transform everything the way we are because of this pandemic, having all of those data sources in one place for your supplier meetings is really cool.
That's a really great point too. And then this next question, I think, is from Judith and Brian. It's probably more for you. I'll give an answer just from our side real quick and then let you take it. But is there a way to separate business and leisure combinations or business and leisure bookings, right? And on the Grasp side, it's from a TMC data standpoint, it's really easy because, you know, the corporates are set up with DKs and all of that stuff in their back office and everything. So you can separate all that out, what's corporate, what's leisure, you know, and it's pretty easy to do. Expense gets a little more trickier, card gets a little more trickier, obviously. And that's where you need to be consistently wrong, as I talked about earlier. You have to decide consistently how you're going to handle things across it. You'll probably have a few things slip through here or there, but for the most part, you'll get most of it right. From a Traxo standpoint, you guys are living in the email, right? So if somebody's booking and they book their cruise, right, you're going to pick up that too. So talk about how you separate that out and what you guys do.
Right. So we can't make sense out of it, right? Not necessarily. So what we do though is we put a set of email forwarding rules, call it the filter. We put a set of email forwarding rules on the corporate email server that's looking for all the known company, all the known travel supplier confirmation email senders. So we know those email addresses, right? So we're looking for those. Send us a copy of those as they come through the corporate email server. We make an assumption and we work with our clients to make sure that that's communicated out to their traveling base, is that if you are booking for business, you will ensure that a copy of your itinerary goes through your corporate email. If you're booking for leisure, you won't. That's, you know, that there are, you know, the way that your acceptable use policies around emails, that your business travel should flow through your corporate email and your leisure travel should flow through your personal email. And you can set that up with a lot of the vendors nowadays. A lot of the airlines and the hotels have different profiles, your business profile, your personal profile, things like that. So you can have different emails set up for different use cases and things like that. But then we also work with our clients to potentially set up customized ways of being able to let the traveler tell us, was it a business trip or a leisure trip? Lots of things we can do around email rules and things like that to be able to identify those personal versus business trips.
And your questions are amazing, everyone. I know we're at the top of the hour, so just being conscious of time, you know, I can probably answer a couple more, but I know Louise has a meeting she has to get to and that sort of thing.
We'll go into speed mode.
Yeah, we'll do our best to even answer these after the fact if we can. But speed, the product, so this one's Deborah. Product's relatively new, right? It's actually not. I mean, our solution has been around and proven for 25 plus years. Traxo's been around and proven. All we're doing is bringing the data set from Traxo into the Grasp world and improving the whole entire data set. So I wouldn't say there's anything new. It's just combining two great solutions to give an even better one to the customer. And so you asked about monitoring success and all of that. You know, obviously we can see everything and around the data, and we work with each client per their goals and everything to help them with that. And that's how you get your payback. That's how you get your ROI and that sort of thing. So it's a bigger discussion had around it with each client, but the data is going to be all there to be able to do it now, right? And that's the important thing. Data security, you know, both Grasp, Traxo, we have all the data security, you know, things that you're going to need. We mentioned ISOs, all that type of stuff, PCI, everything. You know, Grasp, we're getting data out of, I think, over 70 countries now these days, and having to do that all over the world. Most of the Fortune, you know, 50 financial institutions in a lot of ways use us to manage their data and stuff. So we've had to go through rigorous scrutiny. Brian, how about your side?
Yeah, same. We have unfortunately gone through countless InfoSec reviews, and we come out on the other end with approvals always. They do those deep dives into our data security practices and processes, and we were happy to put them up against anyone. We have large auditing firms, large consulting firms, some of the biggest companies in the world that are clients of ours that are comfortable with our data information security.
Next one, does the system show OND type tickets for market share of airlines? Jill, yeah, that's been in Grasp for a long time. So this data helps to augment that as well too. So that'll, I see improvement even there. And then given the amount of data you collect, does the tool provide benchmarking? So Melissa, it does in some ways. So at Grasp, we are actually embarking on in growing out some ways around benchmarking. I think the challenge around benchmarking has always been, and Louise, I would love to have your final say on this because I'm going to say what I say and see what people think. But benchmark has traditionally been, I want to benchmark against a like size program in a like industry, right? And so what happens is you get this data, you match it all up, and you say, okay, I'm either doing as good or I'm not doing as good as these people. But how do you know that these programs are managing their program well? How do you know they're doing things right? How do you know their data is right? Back to this whole conversation today. So maybe you're just validating that you're managing your program just as poorly as everybody else. So in the end, for me, I don't see benchmarking in the traditional sense. We sit on a massive data set of almost $1 trillion in spend historically, right, at Grasp. And so what we're looking at is like, okay, what's your top city pair? Let's look at your top city pair and look at that compared to our data set of the average cost for a top city pair, that same top city pair at a specific moment in time or over the course of time. Are you doing better? Are you not doing better? Is an opportunity for negotiation, that sort of thing. So we can do all that stuff, right, from a benchmarking standpoint. We don't do so much the traditional like-size industry, like-size company. There are great companies that do that out there, and we partner with those. But that's just not how we see the most effective way to benchmark and get real results. So Louise, we'll end it with you on that, I guess. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, I think you bring up some good points. The first question is, benchmarking has to be done in a way that protects the parties. There's mutual NDAs in place when information is shared. So, comparing to customer A, customer B, customer C in the same industry is very tough to do within the appropriate ethics and rules of benchmarking. So again, the first thing is you do need to use a company that understands benchmarking and how to do it correctly. That's number one. Number two, to your point, Dave, you can be misled more than helped by benchmarking that's done improperly. And we find that, most companies really benefit from looking at deals and the discount ranges they should be in compared to a larger set of buyers and programs, but also the average cost, whether it's per room or per average airline segment, or whether it's a rail trip in a certain country. Benchmarking is useful to see, how you're doing. But then you come into a point where if you're looking at benchmarking from 2019 versus fourth quarter of 2021, that's not super valid because of the pandemic. So you have two issues. You have doing it ethically and in line with all the different mutual non-disclosure agreements that live around this data that we want to benchmark. And two, you want to do it in a responsible, logical way so you're not, using information that actually sends you in the wrong direction versus helping you.
That's great. And it's a great way to end it on everything. So thank you all so much for just all of your questions, for all of just your engagement with this. And if you do have any other questions for any of us, please, like I said, you're going to get a copy of this. Our contact information's on there. Obviously, you'll be able to share this recording with anybody that you think would benefit from it. So don't be a stranger. Reach out for any questions or further questions you have, and we're excited to really launch this in the marketplace and really solve this problem. So thank you very much, Brian, Louise. Thank you so much for all your efforts and everything with this.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, everybody. Have a super week.
Bye.